Time for my close-up.
Yeah.
So do you plan the BSides?
I try to.
Okay.
I'm learning how to be more reliable, but haven't achieved that status yet. It's a team effort.
Oh, I bet, yes.
Yeah.
It's not one person.
And sometimes it's hard to volunteer and then be the dependable team member because you have so many other things you have to pay attention to.
You teach a lot of classes?
I do. I've got 4 classes I'm teaching this semester.
I gotta say, you're nice. I mean, breaking away from teaching and doing that a lot. Do you make sure of like coding as well as security class?
I do more coding right now. I enjoy coding a lot. So I have to learn how to enjoy letting my double LM chatbot enjoy the coding on my behalf.
Yeah.
And that could be a challenge for it's better at it than I am. And worse at it.
Yeah. I struggle with AI. The reason I struggle with it is I'm like, okay, what about the critical thinking piece that I'm just like, no way. Using my own brain. So I have teenagers.
Yeah.
I love it. And I'm like, but why would I want to do it for me? It's like saying, brain, you don't need anything, just trust it. So
most of
I
the
use
advice.
it, but then I have to like read it and like, do I trust this? Like,
Most of the advice I've been given is to try to prevent prevent brain rot.
Yeah.
Always treat the LLM as a partner. Never treat it as a proxy.
Yeah.
Or it'll do the work for you and then you'll forget how to do it. Never treat it as a tool because it can do so much more than just a dumb tool.
Yeah, exactly.
There's some middle sweet spot of treat it as a partner where you have to be as engaged as it is. And then I'm still figuring it out.
Joining us for BSides Idaho Falls 2025. I can't believe that we've gotten here. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. I think this is our 8th BSides Idaho Falls. Is that right? I recognize so many of you, but there's also a lot of new people, and that makes my heart super warm. None of this would happen without volunteers. If you are at all interested in volunteering, we have roles of all sizes, from the smallest role in data, where all you do is show up and have a smile on your face, to the biggest role of organizing all throughout the year to make this awesome event happen. If you are interested at all in volunteering, please find
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Lindsay, and the organizers of BSides. I love to be a part of this community. I hope that I live up to the hype. I probably won't, but that's all right. A little bit about my background. I'm really glad that you didn't read my bio, but I have a PhD in psychology, and I work alongside a lot of highly technical people, nuclear engineers, risk analysts, computer scientists, and hackers. I have a personal connection to the community. My husband is a computer security researcher, and we spend a lot of time talking about security, about humans, about technology, and about energy as well. So my research spans like a wide variety of spaces.
You take 2 steps this way, the microphone keeps running out of one seat.
Okay. Okay, thanks for, I kept hearing the microphone come out as well. I don't think it's me. So, I don't think it's where I'm moving. I think it's the microphone. It might be the connection. So I'll try to. Okay. So if you just do this, if you can't hear me, I'll move a little bit closer too. I can also yell and project my voice pretty well. Okay, so my background, psychology. I'm coming from conversation.
We're going to get you a hand mic.
Coming to this conversation from a perspective of someone who has spent their life studying humans. My dissertation was looking at how like different theoretical mechanisms for how practice of things affects your memory for them. But okay, we'll try this.
Testing, yes. No reflection on Katya. Microphones are my fault.
We tested the microphones pretty well before, but I didn't walk around. Okay, so start again. Coming at this conversation from the perspective of someone who has spent their life trying to make sense of human behavior and really understand what makes humans special, what makes them behave the way that they do, and what makes them perform well. And so, obviously, I have a bias towards humans rather than machines, and so that'll come through in my talk. I'm going to talk about security, but most of what I'm going to talk about is AI, humans, and messy problems. And security is a messy problem, spoiler alert. But I'm also going to talk a lot about what we know about human intelligence, what artificial intelligence is, and how we can apply those techniques to security. What I'm not going to talk about today but I think is something we should talk about as a community, is the threats associated with being able to very easily create things to do ill, and that is a very real thing that AI enables. I'm not going to go into that, but being able to create videos, images, convincing text, convincing voice, or very quickly being able to just spam people with a lot of things that could be harmful is a really big threat, and it is a part of this conversation, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about that today. We can talk about it in the Q&A if you want to, but just so you know, I'm going to sort of skip that piece of it. And it is a very real threat. It's a very real aspect of security and AI that we should be talking about and addressing and preparing for, but that's not the point of today's conversation. So, why does hype matter? I mean, I'm going to make the claim today that there is a very large hype bubble around AI as a concept, and that it's harmful. The AI hype is harmful for all contexts, but also for the context of security. So why does it matter? So first of all, hype creates an environment in which we invest a lot in things that are not going to work. Huge, mind-boggling amounts are being invested in AI. And just today, I don't think these remarks were today, but they were very recent. I read about Mark Zuckerberg admitting that there's probably an AI bubble, a hype bubble. Sam Altman also made similar remarks. But it's okay, there's a greater risk. We could risk wasting billions of dollars, multiple billions of dollars. But there's a greater risk on missing out on super intelligence. And to me, that is like the cornerstone of magical thinking. And hopefully I'll convince you of that by the end of today, if you're not already there. Because we're gonna admit that we're not getting the value out of the investments that we're making right now. But on faith, we're gonna believe that someday we're gonna get to super intelligence and all of these investments will be worth it. I don't think we have a historical precedent to say that that's a thing that has happened or will happen. We have the internet and the dot-com bubble, which were bubbles that created some value. Those investments created some value. But this is on an order of magnitude much greater than that. In terms of the investments that we're making, the potential time and money that we're wasting. But then the other piece of it, the other aspect of harm, is that when we don't understand the technologies that we're building, how we're applying them, and how we are changing the landscape of human decision-making, and it is human decision-making, everything we do is for humans, or it should be. I don't know of any other reason why we would do anything, right? To better improve our lives. Everything we should do should be for humans. So if we don't understand how we're changing the landscape of human decision-making and how we're taking shortcuts, we're going to implement things, and we are and have, that create real, tangible harm in all kinds of spaces. In law enforcement, and making decisions about who gets loans, and making decisions about who gets jobs, and making decisions about pretty much anything. We can make huge consequential mistakes, and we already are with AI. And this applies to security, because security is a messy social problem, which I will say over and over again. So we definitely need to have a much more sober understanding of what AI is, what it does, what it can do, and how we apply it to decision making. So the first problem that I want to talk about is AI. We all have an image in our head when we say AI. And in order to break through the hype, we need to start calling it what it is. Arvind Narayan, I can't say his last name, and Sayash Kapoor in their book, these are AI researchers, but they have a very excellent book called AI Snake Oil. They make the brilliant analogy with the word AI, artificial intelligence. What if we had only the word vehicle to describe things as varied as a scooter, a rocket ship, a lawnmower, a steam engine, a car, a freight train? The word vehicle, very vastly different things. If someone promises you a rocket ship and hands you a bicycle, you have a problem. But that is a very astute analogy for what we have in the landscape of AI right now. We're using the term AI, artificial intelligence, to refer to vastly different things, that do vastly different things, that use vastly different techniques, that have vastly different capabilities, and it's not serving us well. When the term AI conjures in our minds everything from maybe spell check if you're being not so generous with it, all the way to the Terminator, and anything in between and everything beyond. And so people think about artificial general intelligence, super intelligence. There's lots of people who spend a lot of time describing what these things are and what they mean and why we're close to them or why we're not close to them. But when we say AI, we are talking about different things. From my perspective, AI right now is a set of techniques. We're using the same word to describe a lot of different things. One of them is We use it for mundane automation, things that are just simply automation. We're using it for things that are data-driven automation, where we augment our automation techniques using real-time data, historical data. We're using it for predictive analytics. We're using it for things like large language models, content generators, classification systems, and all sorts of things. From a security standpoint, we've been using these techniques to do things very successfully for a long time. So things like spam filtering, AI, things like fraud detection, AI. We used to not call them AI. Now, if you go look at any company's marketing information, any of their brochures, almost all of their products have AI built into them. And they're describing a large number of techniques, usually using data to improve our analysis of things. So in order to make progress in understanding how to use these things, in order to make sound decisions about whether we're using them appropriately, we need to start calling all of the different techniques that we're using what they are. And I would suggest not using the term AI. A lot of us are sort of forced to use the term AI because it's a marketing term right now. And if we want to get money from our sponsors, or if we want to get interest from our customers, we need to use the term AI to generate that excitement and interest. However, it would be much, much better if we started calling it automation, or data-driven automation, or any number of other things, predictive analytics. Because then we would understand exactly what we're talking about, and we wouldn't have this image of some sort of super intelligence that's going to ultimately sort of magically solve all of our problems without us putting the thoughtful effort into how we're actually going to go about solving our problems. Do we have the right data? Are we validating things effectively? So AI, start calling it what it is. Stop calling everything AI, because that's not helpful. So what is AI? There's a lot, as I said, there's a lot of things that we're calling AI. None of it is intelligence. And the reason for that simply is, like, we don't know what intelligence is. You might be surprised to know that there is no consensus on what human intelligence is. There's no consensus on whether some animals have intelligence or not. There are lots and lots of definitions, but we don't know what intelligence is. We don't even know, really, how human memory works. We have some hypotheses, we have some information, we have some good ideas about how certain aspects of it work, but we do not know, as psychologists, neuroscientists, as the human race, how our brains actually work. And because of that, we can't say whether something is intelligent. We don't know what intelligence is. We don't know if it's something special. We don't know if it's just really sophisticated classification schemes, really sophisticated data-driven experiencing of the world. There's a lot of things that make humans special compared to machines, right? We have bodies. We experience the world through our bodies. There's a term called embodied cognition, which is our thoughts and how we perceive and think about the world and what we do and our behaviors are deeply rooted in the fact that we have bodies and we experience the world through bodies. And you can maybe simulate that, but we don't know if anything makes that special, or if we can, create a sophisticated suite of sensors and inputs and outputs that mimic a body in a way that all the important things can lead to intelligence. So it's not intelligence because we don't know what intelligence is. So AI as a field, if you're not familiar with the long history, it's been around for a while. A lot of my colleagues, when they were talking about this recent surge in energy, there's like this sort of exasperation, we've been studying this forever, we know all the limitations, and now everyone's an AI researcher, and nobody's listening to me say, hey, can we be a little bit more practical and less hypey? But in the past, up until the 1980s, the AI sort of was dominated by a perspective, the symbolic AI perspective, which is building systems that kind of do things like humans do. So building on human expertise to try and create intelligence or help make decisions the way that humans make decisions. So things like medical diagnostics, all kinds of expert systems. And these had severe limitations. They were very brittle. They worked fairly well when you had good inputs. They worked for it. They could be better than humans, especially if you have humans help train them. But they weren't like general. We couldn't generalize them, and we couldn't create these systems that could do more than just very specific tasks that could break in brittle ways. So with the advent of the two, well, several things sort of convalesced to create our current excitement around AI. And like the 2010s, we had advances in machine learning techniques with deep learning. We had huge amounts of data being generated and shared. And we had computing power, which increased. And all those things made a lot of what we think of now as AI, data-driven automation, machine learning, that came to the forefront and replaced symbolic AI as the main area of interest in artificial intelligence. So most of the techniques that AI is, some of them are used for, they started out as classification, right? Image classification was one of the main tasks and benchmarks that we assessed our AI systems against. So can I say what's in an image, what the object is in an image? Can I do facial recognition? And that has advanced significantly over the past years. When I first had Google Photos and it tried to detect faces, it wasn't that great. It's pretty accurate now. It makes some mistakes, but not a ton. And so recognizing, classifying something as, oh, this is Katya, this is Ginger, this is Lindsay, that kind of stuff works. And those classification algorithms can be as simple as like statistics, right? It's just really sophisticated statistics, or it can use machine learning. And machine learning is really where the start of the AI story starts getting into this really big hype machine. There's been, if you read about AI, there's periods of extreme hype and then periods of people get a little bit sober and pragmatic about it, called the AI winters. I've been waiting for winter since ChatGPT came out, and it hasn't come yet. I think it will, but it's not here yet. It may not come, and that may or may not be a good thing depending on what we do right now. But machine learning is based on an analogy, and this is where I think one of the reasons that we have this magical thinking. It's based on an analogy of the human brain, right? So the perceptron, which is essentially mimicking a neuron, which is something we know is in the human brain, and something we know is related to how we form memories and have thoughts. Machine learning is based on that analogy. So a neuron is basically a unit, and in machine learning it's a node. And we know that something about how neurons interact with each other and the strength between connections in neurons is related to memory and thought. And as we perceive things and have stimuli, the stimuli activate neurons, and the more we're exposed to certain things, the more connections are made, and the strength of those connections has something to do with how we think, and that is how machine learning works as well. So we have that analogy with how the human brain works. But we don't know really how that, we understand that, yes, we know how neuron works, we know how signaling works, we know how different things affect the connection between the synapses, between neurons, but we don't have a really deep understanding of how we get from there to the complex behaviors that humans perform and complex thought. And so that analogy, while it works and it's useful, and we've done some amazing things with it, doesn't necessarily represent what human intelligence is. And it's interesting to me as a psychologist because the analogy between computers and psych, it goes back and forth, right? So behaviorism was the dominant way that we thought about humans and psychology for a while, right? And the tenet of behaviorism is that we don't know what's going on in the brain. All we can do is observe behavior. And so we spent a lot of time studying things that, so we observe behavior, we don't speculate on what's happening in the brain at all. That's not useful because we can't possibly see what's going on. So we don't even talk about, behaviors don't talk about what's happening in the brain. And we only observe behavior. Well, that was somewhat limiting, right? Because a lot of what we want to know, a lot of the big questions, can't really be studied from a behaviors perspective. And so we then sort of we had this shift to the information processing theory of human cognition. And that is using a computer analogy, right? You have inputs, you have processing, and you have outputs. And that's how the human brain works. And so this back and forth between human brains and computers in terms of how we think about them. So we borrowed from computers to talk about humans and to try and understand how the human brain works. And we borrowed from the human brain to maybe describe how we can make computers think more or act more like human brains. Kind of gives us this unjustified assumption that there's this deep connection between how computers work and how the human brain works. But I'm going to argue that they're very, very, very different. And just because machine learning has advanced what we can do with computers doesn't mean that it works anything like the brain works, with the exception of using the analogy of neurons is very helpful to do things like machine learning. So machine learning, as I've said, is based on the analogy of neural connections. So I have a neuron which represents something, and I'm going to affect the strength of connections. And it turns out when you create really complex networks of these things with multiple layers and like billions and billions of parameters and tons of input and lots of training, you can do some pretty amazing things. You can do image classification to a point where you can recognize objects in images. You can recognize, we've been able to do some pretty amazing things with speech translation and obviously with text. And so when we think about text and large language models, which I would argue right now is the thing that everyone thinks of when they think of AI. When we talk about AI, people are not talking, they are to some degree, people who are developing predictive analytics are thinking about that kind of tool when they're thinking about AI. But almost everyone is betting on large language models being able to solve all of our problems. So why is that? Large language models use the same techniques. And there's a lot of different techniques from basic statistics to really sophisticated statistics to machine learning, all the way to large language models, which use a mix of techniques. And there's also reinforcement learning, which is learning from experience. Robotics uses a lot of reinforcement learning. Basically, the simplest thing is the same way that you train a dog to do something, except that you're not necessarily rewarding the behavior that you know is going to get you to the desired outcome. You're rewarding how far you are from the desired outcome. So reinforcement learning is, I'm a robot, I'm trying to get over there, I randomly move around the room, and you're going to reward me for some function of getting me closer to that. And that works okay for robotics and other kinds of problems, and also adding that kind of technique to other kinds of techniques can make them better. And so pretty much every modern AI system uses a mix of these techniques, but ultimately, all they are providing data as an input, looking at all the different patterns, it's pattern recognition, and then making a decision about an output. Maybe that's all humans do, right? Maybe we're just sophisticated classifiers of information that we get. I think we could probably create a model that describes a lot of human behavior that would say that that's exactly what we are. But I think we're nowhere near, in terms of development and creating that sophistication of whatever humans do that makes us intelligent at this moment. And I don't think that the techniques that we're using are going to get us there, especially with large language models. So what are large language models? They use machine learning, they use text, and they have some sophisticated things that they've done, but really they are predictions of the next word. And it turns out that when you take all the text in the world and train a model with it, you're going to get very plausible and compelling outputs, right? And can you imagine what any one of you could do if you could read literally everything in the world, and what kinds of really exceptional things you could do in terms of output? So, like, large language models have a huge advantage over people, right? Because they're omniscient. They have access to literally everything that's ever been written in text and digitized. And so that begs the question, right? If the outputs of large language models are extremely compelling, right? If you ask ChatGPT to go pull some research for you, or to write something in someone else's style, it creates something really cool, really compelling. But don't you think that if we were going to get to, with the techniques that we have now, if any one of us had access to all of the scientific research, we do technically have access, but let's say we could process all of it, right? This is an advantage machines have over us, is they can process things. It can process all of the information, has access to it. Can you imagine what you could do, what kinds of discoveries you could make if you could literally process all of the scientific research that's been done, read all the scientific papers? I can't even read all the papers in that field. I certainly can't read all the papers in the field of AI. And so in this sense, the machines have a huge advantage over us. So why haven't we seen major discoveries made by ChatGPT? And so that's something to consider. In the same vein, if you're thinking about like autonomous cars, right? Tesla or any car that has some of the automation or AI or autonomous capabilities either planned or built in, has a ton of sensors that allow it to see and perceive in all different directions, something a human can't do, right? So the humans can't look behind us and in front of us and beside us, and we can't process all that information all at once. So why aren't those vehicles better at driving than humans? Because humans do more than machines do. And so AI is not intelligence. AI is a set of techniques that take data, process it, and provide an output. And when you think about it that way, it kind of takes some of the mystique out of it. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about generative AI and why I think it creates magical thinking. So who here uses ChatGPT every day? Okay. Is someone, or Chat or Claude or whatever your favorite thing is, Gemini, Copilot, I doubt anyone. Can someone share what they, someone willing to share what they use it for? Researching topics, okay.
Writing rote emails.
Writing rote emails, I love that example. I like researching topics. Okay, coding, that's an interesting one. Okay, let's get a couple more. Let's go back at a glance.
Correcting grammar.
Correcting grammar.
So honestly, I use mine to better communicate with my children and my wife.
Okay, are you willing to share an example?
Oh, I mean, just it's emotion of going to better word it, saying, you make me feel this way, say, I feel this way, just so you know I'm not.
Yeah.
Changing wording to see like that.
Okay, so changing wording. So wrote emails. So that's, we'll start with wrote emails. So I think generative AI is a great tool for doing things that are kind of a waste of our time, right? My question then is why are we doing that? Right? So trying to doing things that are kind of a waste of our time, things that require templates. Yeah, maybe it is great for that. It saves us time. My question is should we be doing that? I love code, and this is where I can't judge effectively because I don't code every day. But I've heard from people who write code for their jobs that it's absolutely exceptional to save a lot of time for doing all kinds of things that are time consuming. And that makes sense to me, right? Because if you're doing something, if you're coding something that you haven't coded before, but somebody else has, what's the first thing you do, right? You search the internet, you pull something off of Stack Overflow, you change it up, and great, you're done, right? Or you do some debugging. But ChatGPT, because one, code is structured, extremely structured, and two, there's a lot of it with a lot of explanatory text around it, and conversation around it on the internet, and in all of our, basically, in all of our computers and networks, then it's actually a great tool for that kind of thing. I think there's a very interesting implication for security that I'm sure we've all considered, is that you're not writing the code. Do you know what's in your code? And are there threats and risks to having your code generated by something other than you? And I don't think those risks are particularly unique to generative AI, but I think they can be exacerbated by that. Your example of trying to communicate better. And the reason that that's a compelling thing, right, is because there's a lot of people who've written a lot of really good stuff on the internet, or shared it on the internet, or shared it in text that's been digitized and used in these models. For people who thought, people put a lot of thought into how do you communicate these hard things to people? People have written books about it, people have written blogs about it. And so we can take from that experience very easily, right? And so you don't have to go read the book, you can just take the input from that. And so there's a lot of really good uses for it. And they're really compelling because we found these really useful things, whether writing an email that wastes time is a compelling use case. It kind of is. But it's really compelling when you can say, I can find a way to formulate my thoughts so that I can be more thoughtful and sensitive to how I interact with my family, with my coworkers. I have used it to sort of plan out hard conversations with people. And it works really well for that, but only because a lot of humans, and in the same case with the code, a lot of humans put a lot of thought and effort into making those things work, and into making the things that exist to train the models. And without that human effort, this is worthless, right? And so the bottom line here is that humans have driven, it's not the AI, it's not the techniques, it's just getting quicker access, more efficient access to human expertise. And there's limitations to how well that works. And I think the other aspect of generative AI, and I think why we've put a lot of faith into AI based on our experience since ChatGPT came out, is that language, we are sort of hardwired, because we're social animals, to view language as a sign of intelligence. And so we naturally interpret anything, even text coming out of a machine. And this has been historic, like from the very beginning of machines being able to simulate speaking because they can process text. We are hardwired to see that as intelligence. And when we are interacting with something that uses language, especially natural language, we overestimate its capabilities naturally. And that's what we're doing. We're overestimating capabilities, and we're sort of like thinking about the potential. We're investing in things based on the potential that they're going to work, despite a lot of evidence that a lot of things that we're investing are not going to work the way that we expect them to. And that's what we're seeing a lot in the news right now, is that a lot of investments in AI companies trying to do enterprise-wide adoption are not finding the return that they were thinking. So I'm going to make the argument that this is a very simple argument. AI can do things that humans know how to do already. And so if you think about all of the really good examples, so AlphaFold, where you have the protein folding is a very difficult problem, and how different the way protein is folded matters for how it's going to behave, and it's really hard to predict. We have like that feeding a system with a bunch of different protein molecules and how they behave results in like being able to predict new things, try new folding, and then see what it's going to do and predict what it's going to do. That only works because we have a huge amount of human-generated data that we already know what it does, and so we're not starting from scratch. The magical thinking comes in is when humans have no idea what's going on, right? We don't know how to predict whether something is an adversary or not. We have some inputs, right? So we have a bunch of logs. Is this good or bad behavior? Humans know how to do this. We do this all the time. But the magical thinking comes in when we think, okay, for any given situation, we're going to be able to predict based on data, which changes, which is dynamic, which humans don't understand, whether this is good or bad behavior, whether this is a friend or a foe. If we don't know how to solve a problem, we're not going to be able to automate it, and we're certainly not going to be able to automate it with AI. So systems, we can basically, machine learning can basically classify things as, is X in group Y, are X and Y similar, and have I seen X before, right? We can ask those questions with machine learning classification systems, which is a lot of what we do, right? Classification is this good or bad network traffic? Is this person creditworthy? Is this person likely to become a criminal, right? We can ask those kinds of questions. But if we don't, like, as humans, already know how to answer that question well, so like, do we know how to answer whether Lindsay's gonna commit a crime? No, we don't. I'll tell you that. We don't know how to answer that. And security has very similar kinds of questions, right? We don't, based on the data we have or can collect, we can't answer all the questions that matter in security. And so we can't use AI to solve those problems. So if humans can't already say with X, Y, and Z data or information, we would make Z decision, we're not going to be able to automate it with AI. I mean, I think what people tend to believe, because AI is based on data, is that data is magical. Data is an objective representation of the universe. If you research social problems, you know this is not true, because I've spent my whole life trying to get data that answers very basic questions with very controlled experiments, and it's extremely hard. If you're a physical scientist, you may believe that data is objective and objectively represents the universe, but I've asked engineers, what does a thermocouple do? Does a thermocouple measure temperature directly? And they all say yes. And I say, no, it doesn't. What you're actually measuring is a voltage difference, and you're inferring temperature based on that. And what's different about that is that we kind of understand the underlying principles. We understand it's not as variable as some of the other ones that we look at. And so when you're working in the physical sciences, you get this sense that data represents objectively the world, but it never does, because data is a human construct. We create the data, we define what it means, and when it's reliable and we can predict it really well because we have good models of what's happening that are not very variable, then it works great. And so in those kinds of situations where we have good data, we understand the underlying principles, and we have good models, we can use AI to solve some problems. We can do probably some amazing things. But unfortunately, most problems, those prerequisites aren't met. And so let's talk about security. I think it's really tempting as a security professional to think of security as a technical problem, right? The techniques we use are very highly technical, correct, right? So coding is very technical, cryptography is very technical, analyzing logs, network traffic, reverse engineering, all of the techniques we use are extremely technical. But is security a technical problem? It's a rhetorical question. I mean, it is. No. Security is not even remotely a technical problem. Security is a social construct. So while we may use technical techniques to achieve security, to assess security, to monitor security, security is inherently a social behavioral thing, right? Systems don't exist for their own sake. We have systems to do things. We have financial systems to enable trade. We have monitoring systems to protect the things that we care about. We have energy systems to create energy so that we can have our lights on and stay warm. We have social networks and social media systems so that we can connect with each other and stroke our own egos. So all of these systems that we have that we're trying to secure exist for a reason, and whether or not we want someone should be using it, whether or not someone is using it in a way that they should or shouldn't be, that is a social construct, and social constructs are extremely messy. We don't know how to predict. We can define whether you're an authorized user for this moment, but we don't know how to predict whether you're an authorized user for all future contexts, or maybe even for tomorrow, right? Whether you should be accessing a certain system can change between now and tomorrow. And because of that, all of the problems that I've mentioned with AI and the limitations in the kinds of ways that we can use it are extremely relevant to the problems of security. And what I see is this thinking that we're going to be able to, if we just get enough data, right? So anyone who's tried to analyze logs for a specific purpose will likely recognize that logs sometimes don't exist, or there's not information or context that actually exists in data that you can gather that tells you whether something is good or bad traffic, or tells you whether someone's a good or bad user. And because of that, we can't get to the point of using AI in the way that a lot of people think we can, without, one, making very thoughtful, concerted efforts to make sure we have the data that we need to make the decisions that we need to. We need to define the decisions that we're going to make very thoughtfully. We need to test and validate whether we actually can, in the context that we're using things, make those decisions. We need to understand that everything changes, and a system that works today, and we see this with things like spam filtering and fraud detection, right? Your spam filter works really well, and then all of a sudden you get a bunch of spam in your inbox because something changes about the way that the people who are sending them spam are formulating it. Because spam, what is spam is not a technical problem, right? It's not just how many people are recipients of the email. It's not just the form of the email or text of the email. It is whether you want that in your inbox or not. And that is essentially the bottom line of using AI and any data-driven technique, which I will say, just stop using the word AI. That's what I'd like for everyone to do in this room. Start calling it what it is. But any sort of data-driven technique applied to security needs to understand the limitations of data, right? What is the data we have? What decisions are we trying to make? How would we make that? How would a human make the decision with the information that we have? So with that, I think I'm close to being out of time, but I do want to be able to answer some questions. We're getting another mic, so I'm in the check shirt back there.
What do you think would be the outcome of this bubble?
Oh, that's a heavy question. What is the outcome of this bubble? Well, I think a lot of people are going to lose a lot of money, but a lot of people are going to make a lot of money and already have. I honestly don't know. That's a great question, and that question keeps me up at night. I think the thing I'm worried about, there's a lot of really legitimate uses of data-driven techniques that might lose credibility, right? We might not be able to fund things. We'll just find another word for it probably. But and so like those, I'm worried that some really legitimate and like good uses of any sort of data-driven technique will lose credibility. I think we're already seeing a lot of decisions being relegated to systems that cannot make them, and I think we're going to continue to see that, unfortunately, and I think that's doing a lot of harm. Things like facial recognition, right? If it's your Google Photos tagging you, it doesn't matter, but if it's deciding whether you should be arrested, it does matter. And I think we're going to continue to do things like that. So in terms of the bubble, I'm not sure. The hype bubble, I think we'll just see a decline in investment. All the things that we're excited about doing right now, a lot of them are going to go away. But beyond that, I'm not sure, and it keeps me up at night.
Am curious. My girlfriend, she's a behavioral intervention specialist. She works with little kids with disabilities, and she tells really sad stories. But that's inside. And I was kind of talking about that idea of human behavior and AI. I started in university before ChatGPT was really even a thing. And I am now finishing university while it's in full swing. And I'm kind of curious if you had any ideas about its place in education. Maybe that's a research question.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it gives me an opportunity to address another aspect of the previous question, which is, so one of the things that keeps me up at night is when we ask this question of its place in education, because it might be able to accelerate your ability to do research, right? But the whole point of education is to teach people how to think, right? We're not paper producers. I'm not, even in my job is not to produce papers or reports. That's like the outcomes that I provide, the deliverables. But my job is to think and solve problems. And that is a human activity that we cannot relegate to machines, especially in education. And so to the extent that you can go find information that you couldn't find very easily before, it's great. But when people do a literature search and don't go read the primary sources, they're, in my opinion, performing academic misconduct, but two, not doing the thinking. And the whole point of being human is thinking. Well, it's not the whole point, but like a lot of like education is learning how to think, learning how to understand things. And so we're not knowledge consumers, we're knowledge extruders, right? We are thinkers. And that's the point of education, is to learn how to do something valuable. So to the extent that education is not a commodity, I think it could have a small role, but I don't, like, you know, fixing your grammar, making your emails a little bit more palatable. I think that's fine. I'm not sure it's worth the cost, but it's, you know, it's okay. Maybe providing feedback, or this, you know, this really providing instant access to those really useful tools, I think is its role, but I think beyond that, it's going to be a detriment to education. So great question. I think Lance has the mic, and then saw Ginger's hand.
So one long-standing view of machine learning is you're basically fitting a function to data. And our functions have certainly gotten more complicated as machine learning advances. So the first question is, do you think that still all that machine learning is basically fitting a function to data?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, and the follow-on question, is that what your brain is? Does your brain just fit a function to data?
Honestly, so yes, absolutely to the first question. I have no idea to the second question. And I had an intern who was making that argument. She's super smart this summer, and she's like, I think it's just like, and I don't know if our brains are just fitting functions to data. We don't do it in the same way that computers do it, because babies can learn new things with like 1 or 2 examples. We don't need gazillions of data. We don't need maybe we have a billion parameters that we don't see, but I can learn how to classify something with 1 example. I learn your face with 1 interaction, maybe 5 now that I'm getting older. But so maybe, I don't know the answer to your question. Maybe humans are just fitting functions to data, but we're not doing it in the way that machines are currently doing it. There's something different about the way that we do it that makes us better at it, and worse in some cases. Hey, Ginger.
So I'm really struck by one of your opening comments, that the entire purpose of what we do as humans should be to benefit humanity. And each of us in this room is a steward of this new AI technology, which, as we've talked about, has a good side and a dark side. And in some ways today is serving to benefit some of humanity at the expense of other humans or aspects of humanity. Can you offer any advice as we step away from this talk on how to be good stewards in our usage?
Be thoughtful, I guess. Question why you're doing it, and also be like really critical of whether it's actually helping. So like, and in this case, going back to education, like, why am I doing the thing that I'm doing? What is the purpose? What exactly am I trying to accomplish with this? I mean, I think we should all be reading about the impacts in other countries, about the people who are training these and exposed to extremely graphic content for like content moderation, things like that, to the human cost of everything we do. And I think we should, this is independent of AI, there's a huge human cost, but also like being thoughtful, like the amount, to me, it's astounding to think that like multiple gigawatts of energy are now being diverted to data centers. I'm in nuclear power, and that's great because data centers and AI make nuclear extremely relevant, and so there's some really good excitement about that. And I have mixed feelings about the fact that that's creating a resurgence of interest and relevance for nuclear power, which I do think is something that we need to invest in and advance. But at the same time, what value is all of this stuff bringing to humanity? What value is this stuff bringing to my life? What am I trying to accomplish with this information, with this tool? And is it really actually accomplishing that? So yeah, I would say be thoughtful, read as much as you can, understand as much of the impact of these systems. And also know that messy decisions cannot be automated, ever. And they should not be automated, because messy decisions require context and extremely thoughtful assessment of widely variable input parameters. occurs. And each situation is unique, and unfortunately that means we have to work hard to solve those problems.
We'll take this one last question, I think, right here from Mr. Wayne Austin. And then we'll give Katya a round of applause before we leave after Wayne's question's answered. Thank you.
So you may have already covered this in some of your points, but since you're a keynote, what's the 1 to 3 call to arms that you would do to this audience? What would you have us do?
Well, so the first one is call it what it is. So when you're talking about AI, and if you're developing AI, if you're using AI, if you're investing in AI, call it what it is. So if it's data-driven automation, if it's automation, call it automation. If it's data-driven automation, call it data-driven automation. The second 3 calls. So I've already said be thoughtful, right? Anytime you are doing anything, especially anything of consequence, if you are a decision maker or influencing decision makers about the use of technology in general, but specifically AI, first try to understand the problem that you're trying to solve, and then be really critical in whatever technology you apply to solve that problem, and understand the unintended consequences of what you're doing. And the third is just to like read more about AI, and also like use your brain, because like our brains are special. I'm not sure why, Lance. I don't know. Maybe we're just really sophisticated function fitters, pattern matchers, classifiers, and that's okay. I'm okay if that's the answer. But our brains are special, and humanity is special, and so please remember that and continue to value human cognition and human capabilities, and don't become enamored by technology and at the cost of human existence and prosperity. So that's it. Thanks, Wayne.
Thank you so much. That was excellent. Everybody, we are back here at 1:30 for our exciting lightning talks right here in this stage. It is 1:30, correct? Yeah, it is 1:30. But please, we'll see you back here and go get a quick lunch, and we'll have a full day of scheduling after that.
come back to work all day. But at least you had a day.
Might be. So Japan's up here.
Yeah.
Japan's the brain of it.
Oh.
China's chicken.
Did you focus on that screen?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay. That should help them. What do you use Discord for?
As little as possible.
I was surprised to see you in Discord.
Discord is
Well, it's always running the background and stuff.
yeah.
Okay, you're like,
There it is.
yeah, I can imagine.
Quick.
Hopefully that's
For a little while.
as long as everybody's doing that. I mean, you can't be,
software bill of materials. Fisheye view can use spotless scan.
Hey, hello everybody, welcome back from lunch. Joseph, are we good to get started? Is that a yes?
Sorry. Yes, we're good.
Okay. It looked like a number one. I was like, thank you, but I can't interpret that. Okay, perfect. I hope you all, this doesn't sound great. I hope you all had a great lunch and got the opportunity to get off campus and get some sunshine. Thank you for coming back. We're going to do something really exciting that we've actually not done in this format before. So we are bringing everybody back into the TAB Auditorium for our back-to-back lightning talks. We'll do 15-minute max. Gives our speakers a chance to get up on stage and talk a little bit, and then gives you guys a little introduction to their topic. Some may have time for questions at the end, some may not. They do not have time for questions at the end. I encourage you to go find them and talk to them afterwards. So please give all of our lightning talk speakers a very warm welcome. Thank you. And our very first speaker will be Braden Summers, speaking on fishing yourself for fun and profit. Braden is a security engineer. He's going to talk a little bit about himself in his 15 minutes, and I will turn it over to him now.
Hi, my name is Braden. As you already heard, I'm a security engineer at USU. I like doing CTFs, home labs, frequent stuff, random ideas that pop inside my head. One such idea is a driving couch. The idea being that I don't want to get off the couch to go to the TV remote, so I don't make the couch go to the TV remote. So yeah, fun stuff like that. So why am I here? We've been talking about fishing forever. Like you've probably gotten like super freaking tired of like fishing. Yeah. Our problem solved. We've worked on it for a long time, but I kind of want to plant a seed in your mind about like where fishing could go and where it might be going. Like we are seeing like a pretty big jump in like tools and capability to like help expedite and like do fishing better from like an adversary perspective. And I think it is very important to know what is out there about ourselves on the internet. Not how it might get used against us, but how it will get used against us in the future. People just leveraging and exploiting this information to do whatever. So why do we care? You might think, like, hey, I'm not like some multi-million-dollar crypto trader, like raking in all the dough. Like no one's gonna be like targeting me specifically for that. You might not be a like CEO of a Fortune 500 company. Like hey, I'm not like some big important character at one of these things. They're not gonna come after me. So I think all statistics are basically lies. So this is more to emphasize my good experience at my workplace, is that phishing attempts are getting harder to catch and they're coming more often. So we're seeing like a lot more come in and targeting a whole bunch more people all the time. So we're also seeing like increase in active factors. We're seeing phishing coming in like via Teams, LinkedIn, WhatsApp, like all those kind of things. They're kind of just diversifying their platforms. It isn't just email and like phishing anymore, like your phones. We're seeing leveraging of new tools in one particular area, LLMs particularly. We see that we're seeing a lot more click-through rate. I think it was like a 30% more jump when they're leveraging LLMs as like an untrained like spearfisher. They saw like a 35% jump in effectiveness in people getting people to click through those phishing emails. And also everyone's using it. You know, we know everyone's using it. A whole list of people, just about everyone across the board is phishing people. With this, there's a decreased cost to do targeted spear phishing attacks. Because whereas before, you know, human experts were able to do the same stuff at 30x the cost. So we're driving down cost. And so that makes it more economical for them to, instead of targeting big businesses, global enterprises, large businesses, they can start moving down the chain more towards small businesses, because now it's more cost effective to go ahead and target those small businesses. Also, maybe you're a bit curious about what's out there about you and like who has access to that information. So what can we do? As I already said, phishing is a freaking hard problem to solve. There's multi-billion-dollar companies out there trying to solve this very problem. But just because we can only do a little doesn't mean that we should give up and let them do whatever. So yeah, at the end of the day, you have people in HR that have to review applications. Their job is to click on links. So you're not like, it is pretty much near impossible to stop all this, but we can do our best. So looking at kind of like the anatomy of like crafting a spear phishing attack, first you have research, reconnaissance, general stuff about who they are, what they do, what they're interested in, like what their circumstances are, and then you target, using that information, you target and personalize those details to them. And then message construction, like how you actually, the nuts and bolts, how you put that message together. Technical deception, that can be like, the email is like, instead of google.com, it's like google.com, that kind of thing, where it's just slightly off. And then psychological triggers. I'll be kind of focusing on the top two right now, and then we'll touch on the third. Where does your data escape? Where does like the information about you that you're using to target you come from? Some of those places are social media, professional profiles like LinkedIn, GitHub, that kind of stuff. Public records, anything that they can just go talk to the county about and collect. Data brokers, that kind of stuff. As I said, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, stuff that you willingly just post about yourself, we can leverage to create these phishing emails. So more records and stuff that you can get or get someone to get for you, registration, filings, that kind of stuff. Here's some like data brokers. You've probably never heard of them. They don't like being talked about because all they would get would be bad press. A lot of these companies out here are making a lot of money off of selling your data. Here's some of the information that they collect, public records, tax records, that kind of stuff, or anything that can get their hands on and then sell. And some of the stuff like I feel like you're a flood risk and they have that information, like you could be like, oh yeah, this person, like he knows he's like more vulnerable to floods, and so I'm gonna send him an email for like flood insurance or something like that. But you're like, hey, there's like data protection laws in place that stop them from like just giving out that data to anyone, right? It's like, I'm safe. Like, there's no way that people are gonna get their hands on this stuff. Well, they collect data breaches like Pokemon cards. Like, they are constantly like getting exposed in some way, leaking some data in some way. And so your data is probably eventually going to get in the hands of someone. So some tools that we can use, you've probably heard the right ones like incessantly, if you've ever watched YouTube, Delete Me, and Incogni, they are a service that offers, like you can pay them and they'll go ahead and remove that data. I'm a bit skeptical because once they remove that data, technically they can go back and recollect it in some cases, or it comes back from that. So I'm a little more skeptical on those. And then this is a GitHub repo that you can just go down the entire thing and you can just opt out of all these data collection things. And so you get a little bit less of a footprint. So yeah, that's some of the things that you can do there. And now here's the fun part. We're going to actually use some of this information that's out there about us and kind of make a phishing email for ourselves. So the person that can probably phish you the best is you, because you know you and you know what you're going to fall for. And so we're going to go out there and we're going to look for the information that's out there about you that you know you would fall for. So some tools. This is OSINT framework. Some of us are probably pretty familiar with this. I find that most of these tools are generally okay, and then some of them are good. But good starting point to start getting some data about yourself and what's out there about you. You can also file data access requests to these big vendors. Whether you're going to hear back from them in a reasonable amount of time is up to you. I filed these like 6 months ago, and I still haven't gotten back yet. So we'll see if they actually do. So you can kind of see this information about you. Another great place, LinkedIn, freaking fantastic for getting information about someone. I find that like 1 in 5 people just have their email directly on LinkedIn, so you can go straight to their email. If you're curious about how to turn that off, you can go to visibility, and then you can see your download your email address. You can turn that off pretty easy. Stuff like Hunter, this is a platform mainly for marketing people. So like getting people to talk to or getting business contacts. Also freaking fantastic for getting all sorts of information, how to target people's personal emails and stuff like that to get access to. Now I'm going to walk through a bit of an example of how I would phish me. I expect you to do your homework. I see there's 5 phishing emails by the end of the day. So this is me. I went to a Sam's concert and I posted that on LinkedIn. So I figured, well, you can just register these for free online. So you can just go here, register for the online summit for free, and then get the email receipt that you received for that. But yeah, this is exactly like the Sam's order receipt. Total $0. But what we can do is we can just simply edit that email to $3,000, put it in our own link there, and then boom, I have the perfect email because I've seen that exact email before. I've seen that exact email, and so if I just change that and change that link, I'll be like, oh frick, they charged me $3,000. I better click on that and see like what the heck's going on. Yeah, so that's pretty good method. Like I think getting an exact email of one that you would receive is pretty effective, but we can do better. So I leveraged an LLM to just feed the email in, like, hey, I am a student at a university. How can I like attract this email? Like you are a marketing person, attract this email to a student. And so now it's like, hey, you get the full in-person pass for $5.98, which is like 70% off. Like, oh yeah, that's pretty attractive to like a college student at a university. Save a lot of money. Be able to attend a really cool conference. And so like this is like took 10 seconds to do with like an LLM, and it probably increased the effectiveness by quite a bit. Yeah. And so this one's more targeted at giving like a discount and targeting students that way. This is how I generally feel about LLMs. They're only as smart as you are using them. So thank you. We have time for one question.
So in one of your earlier charts, you were talking about the effectiveness of detection
number of potential scams was increasing. So you're saying that because of volume, we're still vulnerable, even though detection is getting better.
Yeah, so that first, I think, is this the one you're talking about?
Right? So I saw that. So
yeah, so this one, as I said, all statistics lie. This is what I've seen. Essentially, what it's saying is that while we are getting better detections, they're getting better at making emails and network detections. Yeah. This was 2022 as that study was done, so I don't know, maybe not as relevant these days, but from what I've seen, that might not be the case.
And there's one right here, it's one I made eye contact with.
So this was the same solution.
Yeah, I exactly, this is something I didn't get done in time for this talk, but I have 80% done a system that reads my entire inbox and then sends me a specialized phishing email at a random time during the week. I didn't have like the URL spoofing finished yet, but I actually have half of that complete. So yeah.
If you have any other questions, please feel free to find Braden after, and let's give a round of applause. All right, thanks everybody for your awesome questions. I'm excited about this track. We're going to have MD come up next to talk to us about SBOM tools. Are they as reliable as they claim? As he's getting himself set up over here, I'm just going to give another plug for volunteering. It's my third plug today. Has anybody heard all three plugs for volunteering?
I can give a plug also. Don't volunteer. They'll call you the Tuesday before the conference and tell you.
Yeah, that's what happened to Zach. And Zach very graciously agreed. So thanks, friend. Anyways, if you were in track 1 or track 2 this morning, you heard all three of those plugs.
I do.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is MD Foster Abdi, and today I'm going to talk about SBOM generation tools. Are they as reliable as they claim? Just a little bit about myself. I'm currently pursuing my PhD in computer science at Idaho State University. I'm also a member of software engineering and cybersecurity research team, or in short, SECRET, at ISU, which is led by Professor Dr. Minhas Gibran. Now, let's start with a simple thing. When we want to buy a product, for example, this chocolate from a superstore, what do we check after the price? The ingredients, right? To check whether there are any ingredients that are bad for our health. Suppose from today, this product is selling without the ingredients on the back side. Do we still buy it confidently? Of course not. Then what about the software that we use every day on our phones and computers? Do we know the ingredients inside those things? No, we don't. That's where SBOM comes in. So, software bills of materials, or in short SBOM, are list of all components, dependencies, and metadata within a software. Now, most of today's software relies heavily on these third-party components to speed up the development. But cyber attacks or cyber attackers don't just target the main software, but also through third-party components. For example, Log4Shell attack in 2021, where attackers exploited a simple logging library and injected malicious payloads and affected millions of systems worldwide. To address this kind of issue, US government mandates SBOM for federal software. While US government mandated SBOM, adoption outside the US and in non-mandated organizations is still limited. And legacy software makes things even harder. So what's the solution? To automatically generate SBOM, right? And there are tools out there that claim they can create this SBOM automatically and accurately, but their actual effectiveness is still unclear. If we see actually two formats, Cyclone DX from WASP and SPDX from Linux Foundation. That means these tools can give output in either of those two formats. But the lack of a standard format makes things even harder. And there are few studies that actually validate the effectiveness of these SBOM generation tools. So we addressed actually two questions. The first one is, how effective are SBOM tools at identifying components and dependencies in Rust projects? And is there any significant difference between the comprehensiveness of SBOM tools that gives output in Cyclone DX versus SPDX format for Rust projects? And this was the first study to evaluate SBOM tools on Rust projects. We mainly focus on two formats, the tools that gives output in Cyclone DX or in SPDX format. And Rust was chosen mainly because it is increasingly popular for secure and high performance. We followed these 5 methodologies. We first selected the SBOM tools, then selected Rust projects, then generated ground truth, then run the SBOM tools on Rust projects to generate SBOMs, and then finally compare generated SBOM with the ground truth. And I will discuss these 5 steps in details. Let's see tool selection. We selected tools based on Rust compatibility and those tools that can be run on command line interface and gives output in either SPDX or in Cyclone DX format. And we found 7 publicly accessible tools that met our criteria. 2 of them were gave output in Cyclone DX, 3 gave output in SPDX, and 2 in both formats. Then we selected 50 projects from GitHub that were primarily written in Rust language and included cargo.log and cargo.toml files, and we selected 50 projects based on star count, GitHub star count, and you can see the summary of those 50 projects. Then we built our ground truth based on cargo metadata, which gives output in JSON format, and this JSON file contains components, their versions and dependencies for each project. Then we extracted the component names, versions from the ground truth, like both ground truth and SBOMs, and compare exact and minimum version format. Then dependencies were broken down into single pairs, and then we compare with ground truth, and the output given by the SBOM, and then to evaluate the SBOM tools. This is the summary. And in this table, you can see which SBOM tools is compatible with which format, like either Cyclone DX or SPDX. And in dependency column, you can see 3 tools: CRC, it depends, and SSG, short form. These 3 tools actually have dependency capability, like dependency information capability, and others don't have. And we ran all the tools on same 50 projects, and you can see some of the tools actually failed on several projects. Now let's look at the findings. For component name identification, you can see that shift, last column of these. So shift gives the highest accuracy and recall, and CRC tool gives the highest precision, but most tools have lower accuracy and lower recall with high number of false positives. Now let's look at more granular view. Now these box plot, I don't know if you can see up there, but these box plots give more insight. For example, the median accuracy and median recall of CDX10 and SIF is slightly higher than 60%, and you can see that ORT and it depends. These two tools have higher spread distribution. That means these tools are inconsistent in their performance. Now let's look at the component version detection. And again, SIF gives the highest accuracy and recall, and CRC have the highest precision. And if we look at more granular view, none of the tool gives median accuracy and recall more than 60%. And again, ORT and it depends. Those have larger spread. That means those tools are inconsistent in their performance. So in component dependency detection, I have mentioned before that only 3 tools have the dependency information capability. And out of those 3, CRC and SSG gives moderate precision, but their accuracy and recall is very low. And obviously it reflects on granular view as well. So what's the answer? So we found that all tools shows moderate performance in identifying component names and version detection, and most of the tools lack dependency capability, and those who did actually give dependency information have very poor performance. And we found no statistically significant difference in accuracy and precision and recall for the SBOM generation tools that gives output in CycloDX and SPDX format. Then we actually did similar study for JavaScript NPM project as well. As you know, Java is the most popular language on GitHub, and we similarly selected 50 popular NPM JavaScript projects, and we found 4 tools that met our criteria. And actually, in this time, we didn't consider SPDX format tools. We only take the CycloDX tools, and we found 4. And out of those 4 tools, only 2 have dependency information capability. And yes, we found that CNN, which means CycloDX Node NPM, this in short CNN. So this tool gives the highest performance in component name identification, component version identification, and gives moderate performance in dependency detection as well. As I mentioned, tools don't have the dependency detection capability. Now, to summarize, improvements are needed for all tools, like all S1 generation tools, and maybe a combination of tools might be helpful because we, instead of depending on just one tool, throw a combination of tools may be helpful. So this is the QR code of our website. We have website. So you can find more details on website. And if you have any questions or comments, you can find me or you can talk to me after this session. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody. All right, our next talk will be Aretha, who is a PhD student at Idaho State University, and she'll be talking to us about fisheye view. Can you spot the scam? So it's great we have two of these lightning talks related to fishing because I've learned a lot about how those fishing scams are put together. So that was really educational, and maybe you'll learn a little bit more here.
Yeah. 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 Well, this is my first Python program ever. Well, what's your favorite color? Yeah. Sure. Oh, actually, that's what else. What's it called? Oh, this, yeah, this is, I like this. What do you use to write?
Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Arifa, a PhD student in computer science at Idaho State University, and today I will talk about my research from our research lab named Secret, and the talk title is Fisheye View, Can You Spot the Scam? So all of us probably know that in 2024, the US President Donald Trump's campaign was hacked through a simple sneaky phishing. And it's not just politicians at risk, it can happen to anyone. That's why in this study, we actually focused on phishing email. So phishing emails are fake emails that look real but are designed to steal password, credit cards, or your sensitive data. For instance, this email may seem genuine, but it's a phishing email with too many red flags. For instance, even though it claims it's sent from Amazon customer service, it's not actually sent from Amazon's official domain. And it also contains many other red flags. For example, it creates urgency and fear with the words like account suspended or locked, and it also asks for password and immediate action. And even though with the advancement of technology or all this AI, we are still getting phishing emails. These phishing emails continues to evade automatic detection system, and 91% of all hacking attempts starts with a phishing email. And in 2023, 690,000 adults have lost more than $10 billion to phishing. So this reminds me what cybersecurity expert Bruce Schneier said. People are the weakest link in information security. And hackers are exploiting this weakest link using psychological manipulation and social engineering techniques. They fool even cautious, educated, and experienced users. So that's why there is a growing research interest in human-centered approaches. Recent studies have looked at how people react to suspicious emails and how their choices affect overall safety and security. However, these studies treated phishing email as a one big general category without exploring the effect of different manipulative tactics that the hackers use or their influence on phishing detection ability. Moreover, the impact of visual cues and the role of explanatory feedback are unexplored. That's why, to mitigate these gaps, in this study, we focused on categorizing phishing emails into 5 psychology-based types and analyze their influence on phishing detection. We also tried to evaluate the effect of visual cue and explanatory feedback on phishing email detection. As for our methodology, we adopted a 3-phase approach: first email categorization and selection, followed by user study, and finally we analyzed user performance. So These are some literature review that we have found that identify different manipulation techniques that hackers usually use. And so we reviewed this literature and mapped those principles into 5 categories. So following this, we ended up with 5 phishing and email categories. First one, authority and social compliance. Second, distraction and overload. Then lighting, similarity and deception. Fourth, social proof and hard mentality. And finally, visual triggers. After categorizing these emails, we selected emails from 2 repositories, Fishbowl and the curated email dataset that we have actually previously. And we selected email based on their quality, believability, and how well they fit into a manipulative technique. And if one email fit into more than one category, we fit them into the best match. And following this, we actually selected 20 emails, 2 phishing email and 2 genuine emails for each category that we later use in our user study. As for the user study, participants had to perform 3 tasks. In each task, they had to identify whether the presented 10 emails were phishing or not. In task 1, they received the emails without any hints. It was done to see their natural ability of detecting phishing. Then in task 2, they received the same emails but in a different order and with visual cues highlighting suspicious elements in light red. We did this to see if visual cues improve detection. Afterward, we gave them correct answers to these emails with a brief explanation to create a learning environment. And finally, in task 3, they saw a set of new 10 emails without any cues. And we did this to find out the impact of feedback-based learning. And after this user study, we analyzed their performance. So for the findings, we recruited 64 participants, but 9 actually did not complete all 3 tasks. So they were excluded from the study, which left us with 55 complete responses. Among them, 32 were male and 23 were female. And the age ranged from 15 to 39 years. And majority of them held a bachelor's degree, and majority of the participants were students or from academia. Interestingly, over 14% participants did not know or were not sure whether they had encountered phishing before, while about 11% reported that they actually fell for it. Now let's look at our phishing detection performance analysis. So here we see that in spotting phishing, participants performed 10% better in task 2, where we provided visual cue compared to task 1. So this implies that visual cues help recognize phishing. However, the performance dropped by 9% in case of non-phishing email detection. This suggests that visual cues may cause some bias or misinterpretation. Next, to find the impact of feedback, we compared user performance in task 3 with the previous task. And in task 3, we see that phishing detection actually enhanced about 29% over task 1 and about 6% in task 2. So the participants did better in task 3, and if you remember, before this task 3, we actually provided them with correct answers and a brief explanation. So this shows that the explanatory feedback actually helped participants learn and better recognize phishing attempts. To analyze the results further, we did statistical tests. So the Shapiro-Wilk test showed that the data were not normally distributed. So we actually go for the Friedman test, which showed that there are significant differences between tasks, but it did not mention the specific tasks which are significant. That's why we further conducted the pairwise Manhattan-Wilcoxon test, which actually signifies which pair are significant difference. So from this test, we saw that there is significant improvement from task 1 to task 3 and from task 2 to task 3. So this again implies that they did better and statistically significant better in task 3, and this confirms that exploratory feedback helps participants recognize phishing. And later on, we actually conducted analysis to find the impact of email categories. And for easier representation, I just presented the accuracy connected to just phishing recognition. So here we see that except for the authority and social compliance category, the phishing detection accuracy improved gradually from task 1 to task 3. The participants actually found the social proof and herd mentality email easier to identify, while they struggled the most with liking, similarity, and deception mistakes. So this implies that instead of just warning users, we should train them using visual cue, corrective feedback, and of course, real-world examples. And system designers should consider integrating these psychological manipulation patterns when they design or model risk. And so to summarize, we actually conducted a user study with 55 participants to find the influence of visual cue, feedback, and email categories on phishing email detection. And to do this, we mapped psychological manipulation strategies techniques into 5 distinct email categories. And we found that performance varied significantly across these categories, where participants found social proof type emails most easy, while they struggled the most with liking based emails. And we also found that visual cues improved phishing recognition, however, it is subject to bias. And finally, we found that exploratory feedback significantly enhances performance, and these results are validated in light of statistical analysis. So that's all from me. And do I have time to ask questions?
One question. We have time for one question.
Yes, please.
Can you share an example of an email liking, deception, and familiarity that one of your study had trouble with?
Actually, I have not put that in the slide.
It is in the slide. Okay,
So it will take some time to find.
that's fine.
Yeah, I can later show it to you.
Thank you.
Is it okay?
Yeah.
Thank you. So if you have any questions or any comments or suggestion about my work or about the works we do in our subject, then you can thanks. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much. Last, Lindsay had to hop out. We have Ira Garrett. Am I pronouncing your name correctly? Ira, thank you. She's coming up. Just a reminder, they put 4 15-minute lightning talks together, not realizing that would not leave us 10 minutes for a break. So as soon as we're done here, we're going to move over and probably start just a few minutes late on the tracks. For those that are planning to attend the next tracks, there will be a small pause while we get everything moving here. So Ira, the floor is yours.
morning or afternoon, everyone. I'm going to be talking about determining CPU architecture based on how it does math. It's going to be fun. So, first question, who am I? That's me. I'm currently a master's student in cybersecurity at Hood College. I know it's not local, it's on the other side of the country. Lots of fun. But I did graduate with my bachelor's degree in computer science just from Idaho State. In fact, I went to this campus way back in the day. That makes it sound like it was a long time ago, but it's a lot of fun to be back. And at the time, I was a dual major, computer science and applied mathematics. I haven't quite finished the applied math, but that's kind of what leads into the work that I'm talking about today. I'm a technical educator and I program in Python and C as well as a lot of other languages. I just need a little bit of review sometimes. I'm also an artist. I'm very average with a pencil. I'm a musician. I can play the piano and the kazoo very effectively. And you know what's better than an artist? A martial artist. My first love was judo, and recently I've been having a short fling with jiu-jitsu. Not quite the same, but well, my income says that it has to be good enough. Jack of all trades, master of D&D, and in case anybody loves clicking on links or scanning QR codes from strange people that they see at a conference on cybersecurity, that's my LinkedIn. So if anybody wants to look at it, feel free. So first off, CPU fingerprinting. What is it and why do we care? That's kind of like the first intro to why I'm talking today. Well, it's determining what kind of architecture, what kind of CPU your computer has. My computer right there, it has an Intel core, super cool. My phone, it has a Snapdragon octa-core. Basically, the point of this research is to figure out what kind of CPU architecture, the actual CPU itself, you're running. Why is it useful? Maybe you have access to a system, but you want to know specifically what kind of hardware it is. And you can't exactly just ask someone. I'm sure we can all probably think of different reasons why it might be useful. But let us introduce IEEE 754. It's the international standard for floating point operations. Now, why are floating point operations important? Because, well, we'll get into that in a second. IEEE 754, it's standard for bit accuracy in mathematical operations. It says how accurate the results must be. So, say addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. IEEE 754 is the standard that says how accurate the response must be. However, what's important is that it doesn't say specifically how to calculate those responses. All of that is still up to the companies that actually build CPUs. You know, the people that actually do the hard part, it's still up to them, which means they're able to use fun things like this to figure out what kind of hardware is running. Now, before we get to transcendental functions, let's talk about math for a couple seconds. Computers are very good at math. I am not very good at math. Ask a computer what 10 times 10 is, 100. What's 100 times 100? 10,000. 1,000 times 1,000? 1 million. A million times a million, I don't know, get a calculator. Computers are very good at math. So that trying to just do typical math to figure out what processor we're on, that's not going to get very far. Introducing transcendental functions. Now, Ira, what is a transcendental function? I'm glad you asked. Think of a normal function, a non-transcendental function. We're able to define it by a finite value, a finite string, list, whatever. It's something that's finite. They can just hold in the palm of your hand if you have large enough hands. Think of 4, 12, 25, 12 million. These are numbers that are finite. Transcendental functions are not finite. They are things that are more like best guess approximations. Some examples are sine, cosine, tangent. You get the idea. And this is what I use in this fun program, because think of the Taylor series. It's an approximation for the sine of a value. And you'll notice something. It's not an exact value. So you have an approximation for sine, but it's an infinite sequence, which means that if we have fewer iterations, we have some accuracy. We have 5 or 6 iterations. We have, maybe at this point, we'll have 12 bits of accuracy. If we do 100 iterations, we have pretty good accuracy, but we're still not exactly there. The only way to get an exact value for sine of x is to, have forever, as long as we need, and that's forever. And that is exactly what I take advantage of. So I just ran a fun little program to just do a Taylor series. Say we have a handful of different initial values, each of these different lines. So we have all these are iterations of pi. So I know the exact answer is supposed to be because sine of pi, sine of 2 pi, sine of 3 pi, it's all 0. So we have all these different lines for what initial values are, what value we're trying to find sine of. And as we do these Taylor series for iterating sequences, eventually, between around 6 and 20 iterations, we get a wall. Press the wrong button. We run into a wall. We can't get any more accurate than it because, well, that's exactly where IEEE 754 sort of becomes more present in it. Because we know that the correct answer is going to be 0. That's all the way down here. But not a single one of those responses, one of those answers, resolves to 0. We get pretty close, we get 10 to the negative 12, 15. Like, that's a very small number. Like, in the length of time that I've been talking, my fingernails have probably grown that far. That's not very much. But it's not 0. And those are finite values, finite differences between 10 to the negative 15 and 0. So I ran a fun script, put it together myself. I'm pretty proud. And if you want to look at the script itself, I have a fun little Git repository where I put everything there, including the visualization script. So if you want to scan another QR code from some strange random person at a cybersecurity conference, go ahead. I'd appreciate it. So what does the script do? It has a unique ID for each system. It has a hash value for every time you run the script, just to make sure that's all, correct. It has automatic detection of hardware and user input, and automated analysis. It does these 6 functions, 10,000 iterations, or until we have, well, no more accuracy left. We have sine of 10 to the I pi, cosine 10 to the I pi, e to the I, log of 10 to the negative I, cosh of I, that's a fun one, and then tangent of negative 10 to the I, if I remember correctly. Yep. So what kind of results did I get from this? That was super fun. I'm poor, and so I have 2 computers and a smartphone. One computer, it's right over there. It looks great. One of my favorites. That's the Lenovo Yoga. I have an HP with an AMD processor, and of course there's my phone with a Snapdragon octa-core processor. And looking at the results, I'm fancy. So each of these graphs has something important. So we look at log and E. Those aren't very interesting, but that's because all of these values down at 0 means that there's no difference, no changes between the 3 results from these 3 processors. So running the script on each of these 3 processors, these graphs just highlight where there is a difference. So let's look at a couple of these in particular, because we have a lot of values, but we lose accuracy at about 400 iterations. So except for log and E, those don't count. They're not interesting. But at about 400 iterations, we start to lose accuracy. And so it's not exactly all that useful anymore. But for the first 400 iterations, you can see that there are specific points where we actually do have discrepancies between these 3 processors. Let's look at 2 of these graphs in particular, cosh and tan, just because those are fun to say and they don't get enough love. Specifically 3 values from it. We have iteration 266 from tan, we have iteration 128 for the cosh, and iteration 19 also from the cosh. Now notice that I have these hash codes for the processors. I included the key just because I didn't feel like, including it. This is literally just a copy and paste, a screen cap from the results that I got. But if we look at these values, don't look at the first numbers or the second or the third, look at the trailing values. Now if you'll notice the first one up at the top of the tangent, we have 8588. Those are the trailing values, the trailing digits. You know what's funny? That's a difference of 3. Okay, it's 0.000000, however many zeros, 3. But that's not a rounding error. It's not just plus or minus 0.01. It's not just close enough. That's a legitimate value, a legitimate difference between these 3 processors. And you know what's funny? That's from my smartphone. Let's look at iteration 128 for the Kosh down here. Looking at these values, we have pretty similar trailing difference. It's an offset of 0.0000000003 plus or minus a few powers. But we can see that there is a distinct difference. It's not just rounding. And of course, that still points straight to 28 and C7, and that's the Android. So from this data, it's only a few CPUs, but it shows that using just floating point operations, just doing math, I can figure out what kind of processor I'm on. And I think that's pretty cool. So, in conclusion, math is cool, computer science is cooler, and CPU architecture determination can be performed just with floating point analysis, which sounds like a mouthful, but it's not as complicated as it sounds. I have no idea how much time I have left, so are there any questions? Yes. Can you ask the question but slightly different words just so I can make sure I can understand you? Yes, just using specific functions. Yes, using specific functions. Not everyone is going to, every phone is going to get hit, but specific ones will. And just using these specific values, specific iterations or functions, we're going to get that mathematical difference that we can use to determine what CPU architecture we're on using Rust. Any other questions? Perfect. One more question. Yes. Yes, that's all that my research has done so far. But also, it's pretty limited to just a handful of functions. So far, it's just those 6 functions right now. But if you're to specifically choose ones that are more likely to have that overflow or that differences in traditional CPU, PC CPUs, I'm sure you would still be able to find those differences. Just from this short script I put together for this, I wasn't able to find it between the 2. Well, that computer and my other one. It might be better for determining between, say, PC and mobile device, but that would still require some more research. So right now I can't give the answer, but that'd be my best guess so far. Well, thank you so much.
Okay, so I got the approval from Xanadu, aka Tiffany. The talk tracks will begin 10 minutes late, so 10 minutes from now. So no need to rush over there unless you're the AV guy like me. And we'll see you over there. Thank you very much for participating in the lightning talks.
Oh, yeah, you want to see my first Python program? I have to wait.
She's a mathematician.
Oh, she's running off? No, you should go check her. I can show you.
No, she's fair. No. Sure.
Okay.
She's still Oh my gosh. Okay, so you've got a list of colors.
Yeah, just do it with ChatGPT.
Random.
Uh-huh.
What's your favorite color? Okay.